Well, I'd rather hear comment on this.
Okay, welcome, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. We're a little late in getting started today. The weather, we got about a foot of snow up here, I think, and just trying to get folks settled and getting our documents. So we're running a little late. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Thursday, February 23rd.
Yep.
And were we not on?
Just no, it takes off a little window on that screen. It's
Oh,
a
okay.
little
Just have to
annoying.
say, got it.
Oh, all right, okay.
And then we got it.
So we're going to be dealing with some proposed language to our Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. This is not in the capital bill. If we do like this language, approve this language, we will work with Becky to put it in our capital bill. And then we'll deal with it and work with it through there. So we have with us Neil Kamen, who is with the Department of Environmental Conservation. So I'll turn it over to you, Neil, and if you could introduce yourself for the record.
Absolutely. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Neil Kamen. I'm the Director of the Water Investment Division for the Department of Environmental Conservation. Our division administers the Clean Water and Drinking Water Revolving Loan Funds. And just for round awareness, we also administer the Clean Water Fund, the Clean Water Initiative Program as part of our division. And we help municipalities largely and other folks build clean water projects and drinking water projects and upgrade their infrastructure. So I'm going to take you through some slides this morning. A little bit of a reminder of what Eric Blatt told you, and then kind of take off to the side a little bit and talk about a provision of the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund that was enacted in 2018, an act that this committee championed. So
Yeah,
I will go ahead.
That was brutal.
Well, at the time you had Teresa Thomas championing that.
Yes,
with
we
you.
did, and we
She was a force
understood
of-
it.
And Teresa is a force of nature, so.
Yeah, and we understood it.
So if we could just go to the first slide, thank you. I'm going to reset, pardon me, I am not sick. I'm going to reset the stage just by reminding you that Commissioner Beeling and our Director of Engineering, Eric Blatt, visited with you a couple times in the last couple weeks on sections 9 and 10 of the capital bill. And those deal with the matching funds, the federal matching funds, or state matching funds necessary to draw down federal funds. And as the chair said, $1 of state brings down $5 of federal money, and there is a lot of it. I know there's an active conversation about the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'm not here to talk about that today. However, if questions come up, I understand everything under the hood of that. So just a sort of reminder that annually the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund and Drinking Water publish intended use plans. It's how we intend to deploy the federal dollars and the dollars available within the fund through different programs that offer loans at low rates and subsidy in order to help municipalities build water infrastructure. And also the dollars are available to private entities, as we're going to walk through a little bit for you. And as it's a revolving loan fund, we're continually letting new loans out and taking repayments back in. And we fund the operation of the overall apparatus in my division with some administrative dollars that we're allowed to take from the federal capitalization grants, as well as some program income that we take from the loan repayments. It's part of how we make the operation run. So if we could go down to the next, I'm going to orient you now, if you don't mind, to Act 185, an act relating to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, passed in 2018, and it was at the time, and probably still is, a complicated schema. But it's a good schema, and I'm actually here tag teaming with Jared Carpenter on purpose. We have different things to say about this that I think come from different angles and are going to be helpful. So when the General Assembly passed Act 185, it did basically three things, the law did. As the chair said, consistent with pre-existing federal law, it allowed us to extend the Clean Water SRF to private entities to build eligible clean water projects. And also consistent with federal law, it allowed us in the state to fund what we call natural resources projects. So these are projects that improve clean water that aren't associated with pipes and valves, big wastewater treatment plants or drinking water treatment facility. This is, as Jared will take you through some examples, and so will I. This is the kind of work we need to do to make Lake Champlain better. And so when Act 185 was passed and private borrowing was authorized, the Act directs that private borrowing through VITA. So Vermont Bond Bank administers our loans for municipalities, and VITA administers loans to private entities. It also created a sponsorship program. And the way the sponsorship program works is that a municipality can sponsor a natural resources project when they borrow money from the State Revolving Loan Fund. And when we do, we have a mechanism we can use to offset the cost of that project to make it cost neutral for the municipality, and therefore get a beneficial clean water project out of a large infrastructure project. Jared's going to talk about this in much more detail, so I won't get into the mechanics of it. But it's an important piece of our work, and an important opportunity for funding these natural resources projects going forward, especially into the era of investment, infrastructure, and jobs Act. And so the last thing I want to emphasize is that Act 185 also contains protections for municipalities, because the state revolving loan funds are chiefly there to help municipalities, fire districts, and privately owned public water systems are there to help finance those, to upgrade them, to make them operate well, to provide clean water, to provide safe drinking water. And so Act 185 ensures that municipalities always have the first access to any individual year's intended use plan, and that we don't offer more than 20% of any funding in any year to private entities based on that intended use plan. So that's a protection that I'll come back to again in a little bit, but I wanted to make sure and emphasize that because I know it is something we worked on a lot during Act 185.
Well, let me stop there in case there's any questions of folks before we move on. Are there any questions? And Troy, your screen does show up on our big screen, so if you do have a question, you can raise your hand, or you could text Phil or myself. Okay. Any questions for folks?
So far.
Wayne?
So is any of this eligible for 3 acre?
Let me get into that. I will get into that.
Could you go through some of the projects that have been funded with this? I mean, it's not the piping and that type of things, but what are some of the projects? Is it buffers? Is it taking land out of production? Just give some concept of what it might be.
Sure. Well, the natural resources projects, you could think about a floodplain restoration like happened in the town of Northfield that allowed Northfield to excavate an area of river that was constrained and that continually produced flooding downstream of that. The town, in concert with Clean Water Fund dollars in this instance, went in, excavated that, and created new floodplain and flood storage, allowing that water that would otherwise flood the downstream properties would access that floodplain instead, let that water slow sink drain. Worked great. Buffer plantings, river corridor easements, meaning acquisition of lands right along river corridors and stepping away and allowing the river to take back the land that it needs to take back in order to reduce its erosivity. Those are examples, and I actually have a slide on that, as I think Eric Blatt might say. I heard him say that a couple times.
I have a slide on that.
So I have examples of the private borrowing, and I have examples of the natural resources project.
Just to give the concept to the committee members. And when we did do the language to allow privates to have access to these state and federal dollars in our Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund, we were very careful that we weren't opening up a Pandora's box of having privates available to these dollars at the expense of municipalities, because it's municipalities, fire districts, water districts that do have access to our Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. So that's why we put in the language that no more than 20% of any funding in a year would go towards the privates, because we didn't want to deplete for the municipalities. So it was a very complicated and long drawn out markup of language to get where we were.
And stormwater separation falls under this too.
Absolutely. So a municipality needing to do stormwater separation, that's combined sewer overflows where the street water is combined with the waste, actual wastewater. We fund a lot of that.
Yeah, that's not private. Those are your
Yeah.
municipal. That's automatically with our clean water revolving loan funds and our municipal pollution grants. For that, which is a separate fund completely. Anything else?
Okay, thank you. So if we just move forward to the why we're here today. So as the chair set the stage, just orienting you to Act 185 here. And at section 12, Act 185 signals General Assembly's intent to kind of take a review of Act 185 and also sunsets the access to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund by private entities by essentially prohibiting the department or VITA from taking applications for private projects after July 1st. And so we're here today to provide the update, but also to discuss repeal of the sunset language as well, to perpetuate private access.
So I want to interrupt you there because we have a lot of new members. And sunset is a term that we use in this building a lot. Whenever we put in any language to a project, a program that we're not sure how it's going to play out, like this particular one, we put in language that the program would sunset at the end of this fiscal year, like on June 30th. The reason that was done is by a sunset, it means the program's going to go away, but it's a trigger to the legislature that, hey, you got to review this, because if it's not working, then you can adjust it to make it work and take the sunset away, or you can let it be repealed. Or if it is working properly and it's very beneficial, you repeal the sunset and you let the program continue. So that's what's before us right now. We have to review this and decide, do we want to continue with this program or not? And if we continue, do we do it in the current form it currently is, or are there some tweaks that need to be made to it? So that's where we are. Does that make sense to folks? Okay.
Good, thank you. So if we could go down, I'm going to speak first about the private access, and then I'm going to speak about the natural resources projects. And to be clear, the way the sunset language is constructed all it does is it eliminates the private borrowing. It does not eliminate the access for natural resources projects. So I think Jared will probably say the same thing, but I don't believe we're looking for any tweaks beyond the repeal of the sunset or extension of it, or however the committee would elect to do that. But private access to the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund is important. It does help communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to funds. So a good example are manufactured home communities, especially those owned by community trusts. Have the example here of Lindale, which maybe some of you might have heard that. That's a manufactured home community down in Middlebury. Major infrastructure needs that are being supported by, well, they have some USDA money, they've got state revolving loan fund money, they even have some ARPA grant money. But so MHCs, as we look at the bipartisan infrastructure law and we look kind of out into the next few years and the work that the department has been doing to support MHCs, I see this as an opportunity to continue to support that really important housing and those good Vermonters that live there, to provide them access to capital in order to do the infrastructure work that's necessary.
So are you talking about the big infusion of cash dollars that the administration has put in our capital bill of the 27 million to match the infrastructure federal, or our regular yearly appropriation?
It would go either way, under the regular yearly appropriation and MHC, and you'll see a couple examples of manufactured home communities, this one in the project list that's coming up here. If the committee in the General Assembly elects to infuse the cash necessary to match those dollars, that'll obviously telegraph that those dollars will be available. That'll set planning in motion and all that. But I hadn't intended to provide testimony on that unless you want it.
Because as the committee members, the governor put in 27 million to front load to match those federal infrastructure dollars all at once, but it's a 3 or 4 year process for the money to go out. So that's what we have to balance in this committee. Do we front load or not?
So in addition to manufactured home communities, there are also private entities that need to construct wastewater systems. So think big septic systems. And I have a good example of a elder folks home down in southern Vermont in Vernon that we are working with to provide capital for them to rebuild a septic system. It's a big project. You'll see it in the list next. Representative LaRush, you were asking about stormwater and looking forward, access to the revolving loan funds for private owners and homeowners associations that are affected by the state's stormwater control regulations is going to be an important financing source as well. And then lastly, we even have an instance where nonprofits, which would be considered private entities under the construct of the law, are seeking dollars to do natural resources projects like dam removals. So that's good. Those are good projects, and we want to support them. And I'll just move down, if I can, to our project list. And you can see the total tempo of private borrowing over the past 5 years since we started the program. No municipal loans were impacted in any way by this private borrowing. We kept it below our threshold. We have a couple of large-scale conservation projects that were run by the Land Trust or the Trust for Public Land that have been repaid in full already. Bridge capital essentially allowing a land trust to strike while the iron is hot if they have a good opportunity out there. So there's a few projects like that. You'll see the Milton manufactured home community. That's another one that's an important one for the department. A lot of different funders are in trying to help Milton upgrade their wastewater infrastructure. Bolton Valley is coming to us. They have some significant wastewater needs. This $52,000 project is a planning project, but there's a larger design and construction project in the queue, I understand. And as I said, Lindale, I mentioned Lindale before, and the Vernon home as well. So these are the private loans we've done to date. They are being repaid. 2 of them have been repaid in full. They're great projects. So
What is in the pipeline? What do you foresee being in the pipeline?
yeah, no, I actually can answer that. I should have the intended use plan open, but I didn't. I intended to do it this morning, so give me a moment to get that. And I can tell you, I think we have 3 in the pipeline right now. And the way our intended use plan reads is sort of there's all the municipal projects, and then on the bottom line, there are any private projects that have come before us. So I have it open now, and it's very small.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So continuing on the list is the Bolton project I mentioned to you, and Addison County Community Trust for an additional amount for the Lindale project, depending on how the financing comes in. And then we retain a $5 million line that's available for that bridge financing. And that's on the bottom line as well. So it depends, that may or may not get used. That's not specific to a borrower, but rather is available. So.
Questions? Chip and then Wayne?
How does a municipality go about applying for these grants?
So the division has an application process. We're trying to get it all electronic. There's been some hiccups with that, but a municipality, typically working with a consulting engineer, will fill out a relatively simple application. And if it's for planning, projects can happen as planning phase, design phase, or let's build it phase. So if it's planning, it's a real simple application. And then if we're into design, our engineers will review the preliminary engineering that was done under the planning and some other steps. But essentially they apply through our division. We process the loans, get everything together, and then pass the package over to the Vermont Bond Bank. And the Vermont Bond Bank will issue.
So the Vermont Bond Bank is not involved when you're doing the straight clean water revolving loan fund for municipalities, or fire districts, or water districts. The bond bank is only involved when the money is going to a private. Is that true or not?
The bond bank is the issuer for all of the municipal loans, and VITA is the issuer for all the private loans.
That's what I'm trying to say. I mean, I don't want people to confuse this with our normal revolving loan fund going to municipalities.
Mhm.
This, what you're talking about going through the bond bank and VITA is just for the privates.
Actually, the bond bank is the loan issuer for all the
For all
municipal
of it?
loans. For all the municipal loans.
But it's the VITA piece that's the new piece for the
Correct.
privates.
Correct.
So Chip's question was, how do municipalities apply? Well, in which instance? Are the municipalities applying on behalf of a nonprofit?
No, on behalf of the municipality,
So that's different.
okay?
That's different. That's what I'm trying to weed
Okay,
out here.
yeah.
That is different. When Eric Black came in here and talking about our general appropriation here, that was strictly for municipalities.
Okay.
This is something added to that, that the municipality can be involved on behalf of a nonprofit. So the nonprofit, private can get it. So that's the difference, and that's why I want to tweak out on your question, because you were just mentioning municipalities.
Correct.
And if it's just for a municipal project, this is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about these dollars go directly to private entities. And if it's a,
Oh, I thought it was a combination. Okay, it's clear.
so in a situation where it's, where was it over here? A situation where it was a homeowners organization, you know, you had to pay a
Yep.
fee. That could be a condominium unit. It's a condominium unit on a ski area. That's what it could be.
Right.
And they could apply themselves, or they could hook in with the local municipality for the municipality to apply. So these are for private entities. These are private entities that are asking for state and federal dollars, which normally was not allowed under our clean water and drinking water revolving loan funds. But the feds, years ago, then allowed the dollars to go to private entities. And our concern was you'd have a lot of private companies asking for these dollars at the expense of our municipalities. That was the concern when we put the language in, and why there are so many guardrails to it, and why we have this sunset review. Because it could siphon money off from our towns, fire districts, and water districts. Wayne?
So where do you find the application information?
Uh,
Website?
On our website, yep, the Water Investment Division website, and I can, I'm happy to provide a link over there.
And other thing though, with the money that the governor's talking about putting in, all the money that's come in either from state dollars or federal money, it's a revolving fund, so that fund's going to stay there as it gets paid back.
Mhm.
And so we're building a fund right now in perpetuity, right?
Correct.
It can be used, and as we put more in, it's bigger, so we can do more with it. That's correct.
That's correct.
Do you know what I know Eric mentioned what the balance of the clean water revolving loan fund. Do you know that off the top of your head?
I think he provided a number, but I'm pretty sure it's floating around 70 million.
I was gonna say around 80, yeah, 70, 80 million. Well, that's what's in the pot. And we keep adding to it because we don't want it to get down to zero, then we don't have any money to go out. So is that clear, the differentiation for members?
So if a municipality is coming to us for a loan, they apply right through the same application process that a private would. The municipal entity is serviced by, we process the loan, it's serviced by the Vermont Bond Bank. Private entity, we process the loan, it's serviced by VITA. And if there's a sponsorship arrangement, that's a little bit different. So I want to step forward and talk about natural resources projects just a little bit, if I could. And I'm sure folks around the table are familiar, either passingly or deeply, with the water pollution control challenges that the state faces in Lake Champlain, in Lake Memphremagog, the Connecticut River watershed. And so it's not all stormwater control and it's not all pipes and valves and wastewater that allows us to meet our requirements under the federally binding pollution control plans. So there's a lot of natural resources work that needs to happen, a lot of work to protect streams, a lot of work to address erosion and runoff in the forest land sector, the ag sector, all of that. We're not talking about the ag sector or agricultural projects here. We're literally talking about those kinds of projects, like I mentioned before, floodplain reconstruction, woody buffer planting. So that means planting trees along a riverbank in order to slow water and encourage water uptake into vegetation. The two pictures that I have in the slide here are before and after. And it's one of my favorites because I drove by this today. And I've driven by this site every day for literally over 25 years of my career here. And for a long time, the left-hand image shows you a berm that is constraining a relatively small brook called the Beecher Brook, but which is very steep and very dynamic. And so, and to the right in that left-hand picture is the town garage. This is in Heinsberg. Heinsberg completely rebuilt their municipal garage system, stepped it back away from the brook, and then we had a great watershed partner, the Lewis Creek Association, came in and designed and built this floodplain restoration project. It doesn't look like much in the picture, but when you are there in person, it's really obvious what had happened, in particular if you knew what that site looked like before. And what you're looking for in a project like this is after the flood, after a rainstorm, you want to see a lot of dirt on the ground in that new floodplain. And I went and checked it out. That's exactly what I saw, which is, it's exciting. So a lot of these are the kinds of projects that the allowance for natural resources projects and the sponsorship program can support. I'll just go ahead and go down one more and give you a flavor of what we are working on sponsoring. The top is one of my own personal favorites. We're working directly with the city of Rutland. Rutland has many water quality issues that they need to solve. They have the combined sewer issues. They've got aging infrastructure. The public works director or the mayor or the commissioner, however you want to refer to him, Jeff Wenberg, likes to say that the oldest pipes in the city were laid when Lincoln was president. And so there's a lot of requirements there. And that's true. And it's not even funny, but it's true. There's a lot of requirements there. And one of them has to do with restoring the Moon Brook, which is a brook that runs right through the city. And it has impoundments, it has some disturbance to it. And so Rutland is literally using their loans to sponsor their own restoration project, which is, I think, a fantastic outcome and allows them, with the number of challenges that a city like Rutland has, the ability to do this project is super beneficial for them. A couple other projects that are being sponsored right now that we're working on, the South Woodstock wastewater rebuild. There's a facility being rebuilt in South Woodstock. And as part of that, the town is looking to sponsor several small river restoration projects. So this is kind of river corridor protection again, when we secure land rights right adjacent to the river and allow the river to re-equilibrate itself from a flood-prone perspective, and some dam removal projects as well, which are also good to restore the natural condition of rivers, which is good for flood resilience. And then town of Whitingham is engaged in a major project right now for their wastewater treatment plant, and are working with the Wyndham Natural Resources Conservation District on 3 river restoration projects. So, you know, we're not, I think the take home that I want to provide to you just in terms of the list of privates and the list of sponsored projects is, you know, we're not beating down the fund with these projects. We have a nice sort of slow tempo as we build fluency with how to run this program. And I think things are actually working well and have a tremendous amount of potential, which I will let Jared talk about. And I guess that is actually, if we go down one more, the picture in the last slide was a buffer planting, and the 2 pictures here show a before and after of a dam removal that was completed this summer up on the Bull Run in Northfield. I like seeing the yellow machines out there do that work, and I particularly like seeing streams that look like the one on the right, and I think about using my fly rod in those.
So,
So that's my orientation for you. Happy to take questions. I will provide a link to the application materials.
Questions? That's John?
Where's the money live that comes back, or does it roll right back out again?
It lives in the fund. M&T Bank is the actual beholder of the dollars. Yeah. So there is a large bank account.
$70 million.
Yes.
It's our revolving loan fund.
But it goes out fairly quickly, or?
It goes out. I don't want to just throw a number around, but we were north of 20 million of lending last year.
Okay.
And the intended use plan shows the total universe of possible. We've heard signal from some municipalities that they're not going to move forward this year. They're going to hold back for next year. That's just sort of situational awareness that I have. And I think that is because they're looking at the cost landscape out there right now, looking at escalations, looking to see whether things, ease up a little bit. So.
Wayne,
so how long has this been going on since like 2018
for the privates,
project?
only the privates.
Only the privates.
We've been doing the municipal for years and years and years and years.
86, I believe.
Yeah.
So, I think it just, in terms of as it grows, you got a good enough track record already to know how to work it so that you know what your repayment time on average is in order to keep it sustainable so that you're building the number of projects as you have more money, you're able to expand and not just leave money in there because you're worried about running out.
Right. And so the feds allow for an amount of subsidy that we can provide, and the larger the fund is, the more we can help municipalities offset the cost of their financing.
And that's why we were nervous about opening up that clean water revolving loan fund to the privates.
May I actually make one more point? And I didn't say this, and I should have. Private entities do not receive subsidy. They can access the loan fund at the rates that the loan fund is lending, and the program income rates, but they cannot receive subsidy. No loan forgiveness for private entities.
But municipalities can.
Yes, absolutely.
Jim?
So are there any projects that involve the microplastics in the Connecticut River, which is presenting, draining into the Long Island Sound? Is that?
I am not aware of any specific wastewater kind of redesigns that are looking at that uniquely. I think that wastewater systems in general are thinking a lot about PFAS and other emerging contaminants and how to treat those. And I think when you put in, super efficient treatment for things like that, you're going to get the byproduct of getting small particles. So the microplastics are essentially small particles from washing our, synthetic clothes and things like that go through the wastewater system.
Yeah, just so you know what the problems are, a lot of your larval fishes are very small. Some of them are especially when you get into the marine environment, they're maybe 3 millimeters long when they hatch out, and they'll ingest those little microplastics and get locked up, or either one of two things: either blocks their digestive system and it kills them, or they're eating things that are not nutritionally valuable, and so it's bad.
Other questions? So are folks clear about that clean water revolving loan fund? But this is a very small subset. It's only for privates. The municipalities can sponsor a private entity. But the bigger piece of our clean water revolving loan fund goes towards our municipalities, fire districts, and water districts. And we didn't want to pull money away from them to fund the privates. Chip, and then Wayne.
So let me see if I've got this right. So if municipality is attempting to locate a business in their community, which will put some strain on their municipal water system, is that the connection that we're making?
No, because that would be part of your regular clean water revolving loan fund, because the municipality would need to increase their capacity. That would be this is for specific clean water projects like buffer buffers, floodplain restoration. It's projects that the towns would normally not get involved in.
Okay,
And our Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund is specific for CSOs, it's specific for upgrades of wastewater plants. Could be phosphorus removal, though those are more municipal pollution grants, but still, it's the area of phosphorus. It's dealing with that actual wastewater plant, wastewater treatment plant. This for privates is something totally different. They don't get into the town wastewater treatment plant.
okay.
Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Wayne and then John.
And then the privates, they have to put up a match, money to the loan, you know.
Well, they have to pay the loan back, so.
So that they don't have to put any money up front.
No, not specifically.
It's us putting the money up front to get the federal dollars.
I was wondering, like a grant program, a lot of times there's money up front to match them, just like the matching grants here. So it's not set up that way. It's a loan, they pay it back.
They're not necessarily financing 100% of the project.
No.
I'm assuming.
Also correct.
So they're gonna be putting up something to,
John?
Was the sunsetting date set on any criteria, or was it just a flag for the legislature to look at it again?
As I understand it, as I read it, it was just as the chair said, it was a sort of a signal of an intent to take a look at it, see how it's going, and then decide, whether to allow the sunset to remain or whether to.
It's not tied to any federal language.
No.
Okay.
It was allowing time for the program to get set up. So it was in FY19 and it'd be 4 years. So it was allowing time for the program to get set up, for the bond bank to be ready, for VITA to be ready, and then to see what applications were coming in, and then seeing how it was going to impact the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund. So when you do a sunset, you figure out sort of how many years is it going to take to get a program going. And then you figure out what your biennium schedule is. Do you want to review it at the second year of the biennium of a new legislature, or do you want to do it at the first year? So those are things that come into play when you're looking at how to establish a sunset date. So we did 4 years. And we knew it was the beginning of a new biennium, and we knew this issue was really complicated. So sometimes if you don't, for a sunset, sometimes you could extend that sunset for 1 year. If you're doing it at the beginning of a biennium, and you're saying, well, we don't have quite enough information, let's deal with it next year, next session. But you're still within the same biennium with the same legislators, so that you don't have to start from scratch with new legislators, with a new biennium.
I'll just want to offer that I think we've done pretty well given what these last 4 years look like as well. The multiple perturbations in the department's work between COVID, CARES Act, ARPA, and Bill.
So let me ask a further question, building off of what Chip is asking. So if there was a homeowner association, condominium units, homeowner association, was not on a water and sewer line, but had to drill wells or build their own septic system, would these private entity loans be available to that homeowner association?
So for the private wastewater, yes, that's kind of exactly what we're talking about.
Septic systems like or mobile home park that's not on water and sewer, and they could apply directly to the fund. They would not need to be sponsored by a municipality.
Correct.
And if they wanted to drill, if they had to drill for wells, for drinking water, they could apply to the Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund?
Yes, and there's some caveats there. I won't get into it unless you'd like me to. It depends on the size, the number.
I don't want to get into that,
Yep.
please. This is hard enough just
Yeah.
for folks to figure out the difference.
I'm compelled to share as my last bit with you that the commissioner, as part of his testimony to Senator Bray's committee yesterday, also mentioned this topic. So he mentioned it knowing full well that I was coming into the proper committee of jurisdiction to talk about this, but I just wanted you to know.
So you haven't been into Senate institutions at this point, correct? So you should put that on your list to give them a heads up in case we put the language in, the tweaks that you want. So they're not
The
blank.
Commissioner was in on the miscellaneous A&R bill.
Correct, sorry, I should have mentioned that,
Parks and
correct.
Natural,
On what bill?
the miscellaneous A&R bill.
Agency of Natural Resources bill?
Yeah, a technical corrections bill.
More confusion to the committee members.
I just didn't want, I wouldn't want this committee to be surprised that somebody else from the department was talking about this. It was a very 70,000 foot. This is something we're interested in. Mr. Campbell will be in this committee today.
So what's before us is, number one, to figure out, do we lift the sunset or do we let it go in place? Let the program sunset and go away. That's the first thing. Okay? Michelle?
It sounds like it's working. I mean, I guess I haven't heard anything that would make me think we would want to let it sunset. I would think we would want to move it forward, right? I mean,
So far.
We're gonna hear more. I have questions about the kind of the financial picture overall. Is this now a good time or?
Yeah.
There's more.
Yeah.
Just, I mean, the sense of, we don't want the funds to be withdrawn by private entities, so the public ones can't use them. Sounds like there's enough. Is there enough funding? Are there situations where you're saying, oh gosh, the public entity is being turned down for this money because.
So the law would not allow us to prioritize a private loan over a municipal.
Well, okay, let me clarify. I think I understand that's clear in the law. You could have kind of existential limits on the amount of funding available over a period of years. If the money is more drawn down over a period of years, less is available to everybody as a result of the aggregate demand, and which includes the private. So asking at a more big picture level, is that putting any pressure?
Sure. I'm glad you asked that, because I'll kind of go back to some of the opening part of my remarks. That intended use plan and that intended use planning process is how we take stock of that. So every year we're asking that question publicly. We are opening the application period. Municipalities can come in, they signal their intent to proceed with an infrastructure project through the loan funds. We look at that, we score them based on criteria. Then any privates that come in, they're on that list, they're at the bottom. And then that gets public noticed as well. And so we're literally doing that plan, do, check, act, if you will, every year through that planning process.
And that's why we put in the sunset, to make sure it wasn't drawing down too much money to take away from our towns.
So you're checking on that, and what's the bill of health? Yeah.
There remains plenty of money in the fund to cover all of the municipal borrowers that would come to us. And so again, to get into the mechanics of it, we won't offer a loan to a private at the bottom of that list until we've made sure that every municipality that's above them is either going to move forward or not. And so we get an affirmation for every municipality on that list. It's called the bypass procedure, but we're not, if a private entity comes in for a project, we won't actually process that loan until we've done the process of going through the bypass, which happens around this time of year.
I think you're giving me the information I'm looking for. Just to be absolutely clear, have there been any situations, the subsequent year you look back and say, oh gosh, we thought this was going to be fine, but now we spent a lot last year. We're going to have to put out less this year.
No.
I'm not hearing that. And
that's the answer. No, but literally that is the answer to the question. No, we have not hit that scenario.
Thank you.
Wayne?
So globally, in terms of the overall statewide need, given the problems we got in the state, how does this, is this a pimple on the elephant's rear end, or is this,
I don't want to even envision that.
is this taking substantial bites out of the problem?
The revolving loan funds provide substantial funding to deal with the $400+ million worth of wastewater needs that are out there. Can we do that all in 1 year? No, of course not. But can we do that over a course of years? Yeah, actually we can.
Do you think the way the fund's progressing now is heading towards solving our major portion of it? We'll never get rid of the whole problem, but major part of the whole problem.
You know, it comes down to the municipality's ability to borrow, to bond in order to take the note and for their ratepayers to, pay for the infrastructure. That's really that's the rate limiter there.
John?
Most of the plants in the state that haven't been upgraded were built in the 60s, 70s. So a lot of the money's going for upgrades that I assume I know modern technology is better than it was in the 60s and 70s. So that's where the improvement is. But a lot of it is just to bring aging infrastructure back into modern day. Am I correct or not?
There's a couple reasons that you'll be looking to do a refurbishment on your facility. Either your pipes are breaking down because they're really old and you need to go out and replace the collection pipes. Your treatment may be inadequate for modern day water quality requirements. So Heinsberg is a good example of a facility that is dealing with two different treatment processes that they need to do in order to clean up the river downstream. We're working with them very well. And there is deferred maintenance. The fund, the federal requirements around the fund don't allow us to provide loans for just basic maintenance activities. These have to be refurb activities. There's kind of a line that gets crossed because, for example, if you have a major lagoon and it needs to be cleaned out, because they fill up and you have to clean them out. At a certain point, that becomes a particularly expensive proposition. So. And that's where the engineers in our division are actually sort of responsible for looking at the projects and making a element by element determination. This is eligible for the fund. This is not eligible for the fund. In doing that work.
Do you think that the districts or municipalities are raising enough capital funds, reserve funds to do the maintenance? I think a lot of the deferred maintenance is because maybe they're not.
I don't think I should conjecture on that because each municipality is going to be different, and I don't necessarily know the fact patterns of all of them. Be happy to come back and talk about
those questions are for the municipal piece of our clean water revolving loan fund, not with the privates. That's our underlying clean water revolving loan fund. That's for the money within our capital budget. For that. Anything else before we move to Jared for some language changes that are being proposed? Doesn't mean we have to accept the language changes. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is very, very helpful.
Chair members, very much
Thank you.
appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can come back anytime to explain the clean water and drinking water revolving loan funds.
Would be happy to.
Yes.
Eric and I have a different approach to presenting the information.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
if you want the precise details, that Eric's your man.
Yeah, the precise details gets a little,
The architecture is,
it gets too much into the weeds sometimes.
you may be listening.
But Eric does a great job. I mean, he does a great job. Sometimes for new members of the committee that are new to this program, it's really hard to follow sometimes.
It's taken me years.
Yeah.
Under Eric's tutelage.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. He knows what he's doing. There's no way around it.
I do a lot of different areas, so my knowledge is not nearly as much as Neil's, but I have been involved in this aspect of this since 2018, so.
So Jared, if you could identify yourself for the record?
So my name is Jared Carpenter. I'm with the Lake Champlain Committee. For those of you who don't know, the Lake Champlain Committee is a bi-state organization dedicated to protection, restoration, and education of Lake Champlain since 1963. And I think probably the program folks would know the most is the cyanobacteria testing that LCC volunteers do every summer, and are working with the Department of Health to post where the blooms are happening and where beaches are being closed and things of that nature as part of our education program. It has been a little while since I've testified in front of this committee, so it's good to be back here. It's a little different because I've testified in this room and I've testified before this committee. I've never testified before this committee in this room. So a little bit about myself in terms of, why I'm sitting here before you. I started with LCC back in 2015, and one of the first bills that we moved through the legislature that I helped move through was Act 64, which is the Vermont Clean Water Law. And with that was funding provisions. Back then it was a little bit of money from the property transfer tax, which is about $4 or $5 million, and now we've added to that and grown up to about $30 million. And a piece of that, a good $10 to $12 million every year, is Section 10 of the capital bill, so the clean water funding in different aspects. Not all of it is SRF, but I have seen SRF as a complementary role to that in terms of protecting clean water. It is one of the elements when you are looking for clean water protection is the wastewater discharge, as well as agricultural discharge and erosion and everything else that sort of goes into the process of how we reduce nutrient pollution to go into our waters, not just Lake Champlain, but all over the state. So the SRF generally plays an important role in that. And in this, you can probably go to the next slide. I'm going to be a little discombobulated with trying to keep track of myself and where I am and looking over my shoulder. So Act 185, which passed in 2018, which is what we're talking about here, offered another, to use the cliche, tool in the toolbox for things that we are doing for clean water projects and programs to help clean up our waters. So these are the two parts of Act 185 that we've been talking about here. Neil is mostly talking about Part A, but also Part B. So you'll see you see the sunset language of June 30th, 2023 that you basically cannot accept any applications after that. So come June 30th, 2023, the program would cease to exist. For the natural resources part, sponsorship program defined, which I'll talk about in a little bit, it's really not as much of a sunset, but really sort of you see the last line there, reviewed during the 2023 legislative session. It's more of a look in, like, okay, let's pop the hood, see what's going on. Neil and I have always sort of considered both of these tied together as, so I consider really as this is part of the sunset of 2023. I guess theoretically, WISPR will keep going, but they're sort of tied together under Act 185. So that sort of is setting the stage of the language. Me being an attorney, I spent a lot of time looking at language. So this is the language sort of that we're asking the committee to consider, and I will offer a very simple suggestion in language change afterwards.
Just delete it all.
Just a lot of lines. Yes, ma'am.
Just delete it so that we lift the sunset so the program continues.
Precisely. That is my second to last slide. Is this exact language with lines all the way through. But next slide. So here's the creation, the expansion of the revolving loan fund. Expanded the definition of clean water project to provide loans for planning and construction of clean water projects, and then the definition was changed for what is a clean water project in the second paragraph there. Means water pollution abatement and control facilities, so the traditional wastewater infrastructure, which is what one thought about before. And it now includes natural resources projects that provide water quality benefits. So those are sort of the two components of this that expanded this beyond just not only municipal wastewater infrastructure, but as Neil was talking about, the private wastewater infrastructure as well. And this meant that it really opened up sort of a host of projects, a host of possibilities, I guess, in the natural resources world in terms of funding projects under very specific circumstances. I mean, it's certainly not wheeling and dealing by any means. So if I could have the next slide, please. Great. So Act 185 created the structure for what is called the Water Infrastructure Sponsorship Program, which we call WISPR. And this was, as we were talking about before, Teresa Thomas, who sort of was the architect of Act 185 as it moved through the building. This was sort of one of her thoughts with all of this. So the WISPR program provides for the pairing of a gray infrastructure project, wastewater, such as upgrade to wastewater facility, with a green natural resources project. Both have to have the goal of improving water quality. That's key. It can't just sort of be whatever sort of green project you want. So the municipality undertaking the gray project will partner with a nonprofit organization that will perform and maintain the green project. So in a sense, the municipality is sponsoring the green project but does not have responsibility for it. So as an example, the Nature Conservancy would be the sponsor of, the conveyor of the green project, would work with a local municipality who would sponsor the program, but it would be the responsibility of the Nature Conservancy to perform the green project and then maintain the green project afterwards. So this would not fall on the shoulders of the municipality. It would be in the agreement between the two that the nonprofit organization would be the sponsor of that green program, whatever it is, and would handle maintenance and operations afterwards. But it opens up, the doors of a lot of different possibilities. And I am going to pause, take a deep breath, because I'm sure with sort of talking about how that mechanism works, folks might have some questions before I move on. And also bearing an eyeball on the clock, so the committee gets a break before the 10 o'clock.
So if a municipality had a stormwater project, and they could partner with Nature Conservancy or Land Trust or some other organization and have a green project. So that it would be up to the municipality to contact nonprofit or other organization. Or
the other way around. I mean, the NGO would have a project in mind that they would like to do, and they would work together. And you could get into other benefits as well of everybody can go to the ribbon cutting and talk about it and put out do a lot of public relations on look at the great programs we're putting together and the green projects we're doing. Actually, if you could do the next slide. These are eligible projects. They're all under EPA 2016 guidance, I think. Sounds about right, of what is eligible as a program. And it has to have a water quality benefit. But if you'll see from a lot of these projects, there's a lot of co-benefits that come with this as well. For example, wetlands restoration does have a water quality benefit because it filters out nutrients and it also works in, to reduce flood hazards. But it's also sequestering carbon. There's also a climate resiliency benefits in terms of flood. It's wildlife habitat. It's a lot of different things in a lot of these different projects. Dam removal's becoming more and more popular. A couple of years ago, there's really only one organization, the Connecticut River Conservancy, that was doing them on a regular basis. And now there's a lot of groups that are looking at removing, not Winooski 1. We're not talking dams that actually generate a lot of hydro, but there's a lot of over 1,000 broken down old mill dams that have no generating possibility, but they are impeding water quality and they're impeding habitat. And those are the kind of programs that you could a municipality and an NGO could work together to sponsor to go through a removal of that. So there's a lot of potential with this coming up in terms of not only the SRF funds that we have now, but Neil refers to it as BIL, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. I still refer to it as IIJA, because I always forget the acronym.
Don't worry about it. It's the infusion of a lot of money over the next 4 or 5 years.
It's a lot more money, as Eric was talking about, in terms of a big block of cash coming in over the course of 5 years into the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund and Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund.
And for the committee, that's that big slug of cash, 27 million.
I have a slide for that.
To draw it down, but it will be banked for about 4 years.
Yep.
Just keep that in the back of your mind when you come in to markup. Hint, hint.
So
hint, hint.
Next slide. So yes, and this is what we were just talking about. In the course of time that I've been doing this, there has, like I had mentioned, we have been getting more and more funding for clean water projects and programs through Act 64 and other SRF, Capital Bill, other programs. ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, has provided a tremendous amount of federal funding for clean water projects. This body, over the course of the last 2 years, appropriated $219 million in ARPA money for clean water projects and programs. Unfortunately, DEC or A&R has cited the need over 10 years. It's just over $2 billion. Not all of it wastewater and drinking water, but a big part of it is. And so I'm looking at this supplemental SRF funding as the next bridge. So fill the gap in the ARPA funds to help provide for continued progress in addressing the backlog of the water infrastructure projects and programs. Good morning. No, not at all. No, that's quite all right. Pretty well.
We have a question, Wayne?
So is that an estimate of the size of the elephant that we were mentioning, 2 billion?
If you would skip 2 slides, not the next one, but the one after. There's the elephant.
2 billion.
So I've got, here's the.
But that's over 10 years.
Right, but this is the upgrade up above for drinking water, but then of course there's all sorts of other things that are part of that elephant. So, whatever we can do to help address the elephant is sort of what we're aiming for here. So this former Commissioner Peter Walk and Julie Moore have put this together, and this is their estimate as of 2021, actually as part of a discussion on ARPA funding. So, and if you go back 1 slide, I think Eric showed you this one. So here's the funding that we're coming in, potentially getting in. So for the clean water supplemental would be 54, drinking water supplemental would be 110. And you add your 9 and your 18, there's the 27 in state match that would be needed to draw down this amount of money. I will not put a plug in for that $27 million right now and stay on target, but I will come back at some point and put a plug in for that full $27 million, knowing that the chair has some misgivings about parking that amount of money over the course of 4 or 5 years. But it's a lot of money, and to be able to plan out that we know that we will be able to get that federal money and plan for 25 and 26, knowing that that match is there, will be very important. So that's my sort of pitch on the need, not only for the funding, but the importance of these natural resources projects and things that provides the opportunity to not only do more water quality projects outside of the gray infrastructure, wastewater, and things of that nature, be it public or private, but also allowing NGOs to fund their work for dam removals, for wetlands restorations, for floodplain acquisitions, for erosion control, all the way down to things like riparian plantings, which is just a fancy way of saying we're going to plant a whole bunch of little tiny trees next to the bank to hold the stream bank in. So very important part, I think, of WHISPER, of F185 is the WHISPER program. And if you would advance 2 more, I would remind you that this is the language that we're looking at. And the suspension of private loans and the sunsets and everything. If you advance 1 more slide, this is my language recommendation.
Just delete the sunset.
Just eliminate the language, and therefore you have
Program go.
no sunset. It would be something that you could either put in the capital bill or someplace else if the capital bill is not the appropriate venue. And that is, if you want to do 1 more. That's me.
Great.
My email address, if anybody needs it, but as most of you realize, I'm in the building on a regular basis, so it's probably just easier to write me down.
So I have a question for Neil.
Here, how can I be?
I have a certain look.
There's that.
So I'm looking at the money we put in the capital budget for FY22 and FY23, though the FY23, I believe, probably came out of ARPA for the clean water and drinking water state match. I'm looking at this chart here.
Right.
Okay. So for FY22, for the state match that we use for the clean water fund, we put in 880,000 plus. And for the drinking water was 1.795. And then in FY23, there was over $1 million that was put in for the clean water and $2 million for the drinking water. And I believe those were probably ARPA funds for that section. It didn't come out of the capital budget. of those 2 years appropriation, FY '22 and FY '23, how much of those dollars are remaining of our state match?
For the capital, for the,
Well, I
State
want
match.
both. I want the capital
Yeah.
specifically, but I also want for FY '23, I'm assuming those were ARPA dollars for FY '23.
so, just a point of clarity that ARPA, we can't use ARPA dollars to match.
That's right, we
Federal.
can't.
So
That's right, I forgot
it
about
was the
that.
capital bill that raised the match for the base awards, and it was the capital bill that raised the match for the bill, the first year, federal 22, state fiscal 23 of the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Okay, so that's what, I'm looking at last year's. See, this isn't tracking with our spreadsheet of last year. So maybe this is a conversation, maybe,
I'll have to bring up some resources.
yeah, what we did last year in FY '23 for our 10% match for the federal infrastructure was 2.8. But this chart that's in Jared's
Oh, yeah, it would go.
I can bring it back up.
doesn't, it
Oh,
reflects it's more like 3 million.
Okay, I know, I understand. The chart that Jared just showed is basically, those are the best estimates of what we were going to be getting when
Okay,
we put that chart together. So what happens is EPA takes a little haircut on their end. These dollars flow through the formula. So for example, the supplemental dollars may not be exactly 10,198,444 for the Clean Water SRF. I'm looking at Jared's chart. It may be something a little bit slightly different than that, and we will have had better, by the time we provided last year's information, we'll have had the allocations, I think, at that time.
so my question that I would like you to come back with us with a number is in FY '23, not FY '22, because it wasn't, the supplemental we did not need to do in FY '22 because the federal infrastructure bill had not passed at that point. So in FY '23, we put in the capital bill for the clean water and drinking water state match to the infrastructure bill, that was supplemental, was 2,833,980. How much of that is still available for the federal match?
I can find out. What I do want to communicate is that those dollars were the matching dollars to draw down those dollars, plus or minus a true up to what the actual allocation will be from EPA.
Right, so it's not what we're seeing in this chart here.
It'll be close.
It'll be close,
It'll be
because
close.
what we've got here on the second line down, clean water supplemental state match, that's for the match to the federal infrastructure bill.
Correct.
And what was proposed there was $1 million for that. And then you go down a few lines to the drinking water supplemental state
Yep.
match, that was 2 million. So it was about $3 million that they put there for our state match to draw down those federal supplemental dollars. What we ended up putting in the capital bill for FY '23 was 2.8 million plus. So I want to know how much,
That plus that.
not in FY '22.
I'm sorry, here's the confusion. These are federal fiscal years.
Oh, that's right, that,
So
oh,
these are federal fiscal years
Yeah.
for which, sorry, I don't mean to
oh.
do blackboard moment.
No, I get
For which we use state, it's the state fiscal year.
So the state FY '23 dollars is the first column.
That and that.
My understanding is those have already been paid in, correct?
Well, we are drawing down, we've excuted on the grant
So
awards,
it's
so we're
really not-
drawing those down.
So it's really not 27, it's 27 minus those two. It's
That's correct.
24 and a half or something.
Eric will have sent a corrected number up.
So I want to know of our 2.8, because I don't want to get into too complicated with the committee because our state fiscal years don't line up with our federal fiscal years. And then you have a year and a half to match the dollars so you can match it in a different fiscal year. I want to know right now of the 2.833 that we put in FY23 in the capital bill, how much is left?
Right, has it been deposited in the fund yet or not?
But you've got to draw down the money. Have you used any of those funds to draw, how much of those funds have you used to draw down federal dollars? Because you don't have to use all of that money that we put in, the 2.8, all at once. That can get spread out over a year and a half at least because of the funding cycle on the federal level. And you got to see where your projects are ready to go. So I want to know what's left over, that 2.8.
I will find out.
Will help us in the markup, folks. What I'm trying to get at. Does that make sense to the committee?
So that's my presentation. If folks have any other questions. So thank you so much for the time. Very much appreciated.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Anything else for folks? I'm so.
General question, the health of Lake Champlain, which direction is it going?
It's going in the right direction. And we are reducing nutrient loading into Lake Champlain. It's a under the total maximum daily load process set up by the US EPA. It is a 3-year process. The agricultural pollution is being addressed, first, for the most part, that's sort of the low-hanging fruit. It's getting to some of the other, it's actually the wastewater is, well, the agricultural improvements for the for limiting discharge is actually the most bang for the buck. When you're getting into the wastewater and trying to reduce phosphorus out of a wastewater system, that's expensive for the amount that you're going to actually get out of it, that you're going to squeeze out of it. So things are trending in the right direction, but it's, there's a lot of phosphorus, there's a lot of legacy phosphorus, and the lake's getting, we're getting those warmer days that don't help with the blooms. There's obviously other factors as well, CSO discharge also being addressed. Those are the ones, that's the bacteria that goes to leaches and things of that nature.
Is the parallel effort in New York equal to ours? No.
No, because most of I can't remember the percentages off the top of my head, but I think it's about 2/3 of the discharge comes from Vermont because they have, other than Plattsburgh, they have the Adirondacks, so they don't have nearly the amount of agriculture and municipalities and everything else that we have on this side. They do have their own programs, and then Quebec is 5% maybe. But so the bulk of the discharge comes from Vermont, therefore the bulk of it is.
Wayne?
On your side, but I live right on Lake Carmine.
Not as familiar, but familiar.
I'm pretty familiar since I keep my windows closed
yes.
for like 3 or 4 months out of the year. But, they're always testing and putting up signs, but they haven't been doing any toxin testing. How come they aren't testing toxin?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure, and that's not really Neil's wheelhouse either.
Because you can go onto Amazon. I went onto Amazon.com. You can buy a toxin testing kit for like $25. So I talked to the Lake Camperers Association and said, hey, why aren't you buying enough kits so you can test them 2-3 times a week? That way you're not putting up signs when there's no toxin there. Because algae is not harmful unless the toxin is.
I can ask some folks in Neil's department and see if I can find an answer for you. Water quality monitoring would probably be a start.
Thanks.
We'll have a chat in the cafeteria.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll have a side conversation. Anything else? So, Chip?
So something I keep going back to, and I don't understand why we're not dealing with it, and maybe you can help me, but it seems to be hundreds of acres of impervious surface in Williston, which apparently a major part drains into the lake. And the fix seems to be relatively simple by putting green areas in those parking lots with curb cuts and to absorb some of the runoff that comes from them. And I'm not understanding why it's not happening. I think that, we've seen new businesses open up there. I think that there's a lot of very successful businesses there. It seems like we ought to be doing something about that.
It is. It's a number of different, and you'll just speak this as well, it's a number of different permitting programs depending. I mean, under new permits, you're supposed to put in those sort of
Right.
swales and
Yep.
green traps and things of that nature to capture the water, therefore capture the sediments and the nutrients. And then under, and that goes down to half-acre requirements now for new impervious surfaces. And then an issue that this committee has dealt with in the past is the 3-acre. The 3-acre permits, which is going back and retrofitting all of those. And the process is sort of moving, my understanding is in 2 phases where they're filing notices of intent, basically plans of what they need to do. So they're sort of at the beginning of that part of retrofitting. Neil, if you want to fill in the gaps a little bit.
Yeah, you did. I think a lot of the stormwater management might not be as visible as some of that green stormwater management that you're talking about. New businesses are all required to comply with the new state stormwater manual, which has a variety of practices you can figure out based on your site and the cost, cost optimize, get the treatment you need. And it may not necessarily be the kind of retrofits that you're talking about, which I love seeing, and I get frustrated when I don't.
Yeah,
It doesn't
me too.
mean that there isn't actually a stormwater treatment system.
I mean, we're hearing from the fair associations yesterday that are looking at millions of dollars of expenditure that they don't have to treat their impervious surfaces, which are compressed gravel rather than blacktop even. And I suspect that they do have runoff, but they don't have drains such as these parking lots have that can collect salt and sand and water and oil and all kinds of other things that run into the lake.
Correct. I've heard that as well, testimony of
Yeah.
House Ag in years past. Of, the fairs have a lot of impervious surface, and a lot of those fairgrounds sit idle for the vast majority of the year, so there's not a lot of income.
Yep.
And that is, I don't know if there's programs and such being worked on for assist with that. A lot of these grant programs would probably help with that.
There are a few, that's what they were here yesterday. There are grant programs, but they're not coming up to the cost level that they're looking at to make solutions to that.
Wayne?
So actually for both of you, my concern is 3-acre rule, and things like how much it's costing per fairground to do something. When you're not really seeing the kind of erosion issues that would be causing massive amounts of soil or anything to disappear, or have the phosphorus at a level that you'd see on an agricultural facility. And given the magnitude of the problem on an agricultural facility, are we spending our money in the right place to get the biggest bang for the buck? Now, I understand under stormwater separations, if it's going into a treatment plant that's going to overflow into Lake Champlain and dumping everything in there, that should be a really high priority. But then when we're talking, grants, to farms, and we're given the same amount of grant to a 5,000-acre farm as we do to a 50-acre farm, and when we're spending all kinds of money on things that are not contributing to sediment load or phosphorus load to a stream, are we structured to spend our money where we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck? Maybe a hard question, but it's not just a question for you, because you're operating under the laws set by the state. But if we don't know where adjustments need to be made, then we can't start talking about it.
So the Clean Water Performance Report is issued by the Clean Water Initiative Program in our division every year. It takes stock of where those investments go, takes stock of the progress against the required reductions. So, stormwater is cost per pound the most expensive. It just is. It's also one of the sectors that does need to be regulated along with agricultural sector, forest sector, all of them, roads. And the General Assembly has a couple of instances taken a new look at that and elected to continue to move forward with the regulations in place. So, what we talked about earlier today presents a financing mechanism for an HOA or something like that to help them comply.
I think generally the answer is yes. Generally, the money is going to where it needs to be going. I mean, Neil and I have been having these discussions for years over, more money needs to go to ag, or more money needs to go to this, or how are we breaking up the 3-acre money so
Walmart doesn't get a lot of money, but Bob's used cars, because Bob doesn't have the money to do it otherwise. So, all those sort of discussions of exactly how it's being pieced out. I mean, the fact that the fund has grown over the past 7 years from $4 million to, where are we now, 30-ish?
Clean water fund?
Just the clean water fund, $30 million nature, but we saw the need. So there's always the need for more. But I think, and Neil runs one shop at DEC, and then there's a separate program over Agency of Agriculture that has, they get their funds and get projects and programs, and conservation districts are involved in it. So it's a lot of moving pieces. But the short version to your question is yes. It sounds like you come up here. Yes. Thanks.
So, thank you for coming in. When we do markup, we'll address this sunset one way or the other. So let's take a quick 10-minute break. For folks from Ag just came in, but we need to take a break and